What's going on, everybody? Welcome to the Black Occultist Show. Today is June the 19th, 2021. It is a Saturday. I know I haven't really been consistent on the days that we're going to drop the pod, and I'm kind of running some little tests right now. So kind of bear with me a little bit as the days kind of switch up a little bit till we get a little more settled. But expect to hear a show, every week or so. We're gonna keep it about right there. So today, I wanted to talk to y'all about the show Loki. Right, the show Loki has started on Disney Plus. It comes on Wednesdays, and it's already aired 2 episodes. And I wanted to kind of talk a little bit about that show and what's being revealed in that show. What type of metaphysical symbology or spiritual messages are embedded in the show, and it's really a lot. And I honestly admit I'm really, really, really feeling the show a lot. I mean, I really, really like the show, but I love Disney anyway because they pretty much they're the occult master storytellers. Most people gonna tell you the opposite. They're gonna say they don't like it for that reason, but I'm gonna say that I do like it for that reason because they are always consistently relaying a lot of these messages and a lot of these themes and storylines that I talk about a lot in reference to occult and metaphysics and shadow work and just things of that nature. So I find that a lot of their movies are great analogies. They are great ways to translate the same information just through storytelling. And I think that that is the power of storytelling that we don't always recognize. That there's so much power in storytelling. And with this particular story, I think there's some very powerful, powerful messages in it. Now, I'm not giving you this based off of comic books or, anything like that. I'm just watching the show as it comes on, and I'm just giving what I see with my third eye from what I'm watching in that show. So it's not based on anything. This is really just my thoughts. And I wanted to really talk about this because Loki, since he's known as the god of mischief, or as a lot of people like to say, a trickster, he's seen as an adversary. And I think it's very, very important that we understand the role and the necessity of the adversary and what that means to the bigger picture. Now the way I see it is because Loki is an agent of chaos, he is able to change his destiny. That's why he picked up that cube, because in him doing so, he created a new timeline for himself, giving him the opportunity to be able to transcend into something even greater. Doing something you're not supposed to do, so to speak, and it leads to a major transformation. Well, by definition, that's chaos. So, and if you don't know, let me take a step back real quick. Let me take a little step back. So the show goes back to the very first Avengers movie, because after we had End Games, or an Infinity War, when they went back in time, there was a part. They lost the cube, and Loki picks up the cube, and he disappears. That's not supposed to happen, right? So this show picks up on where does that Loki from that timeline go when he picked up that Tesseract and left the scene, because he was never supposed to do that. Because as you know, looking at if you've seen the MCU movies, he ends up going back to Asgard and everything that leads up to Thor 2 and everything and all of that. So it was a part of the plan. It was a necessary thing that was supposed to happen. Him losing his capture was supposed to happen. And we're going to talk about that even a little bit more. All right, so when you look at the first episode, on the first episode, when it first comes on, after he's disappears, the first thing you see that comes on the screen is a beetle going across the sand in the desert. That's the first sign of symbolism right there. It's like the burning sand. Burning sand, if just like anybody in a fraternity or sorority, crossing the burning sand, is symbolizing crossing over, becoming something new, because this is representing now he's in a new timeline. And see, the beetle, if you go back to ancient Kemet or ancient Egypt, the beetle, the dung beetle, represents resurrection. It represents transformation. So the way that the beetle pushes the dung and it comes up, the way the sun rises again, it's the representation of it's a representation of transformation. So that, along with the sand, is already kind of like, this is something that is brand new. This is a whole new area. This is a whole new timeline. So then that's when the time variant authority pops up. And they tell Loki that he's a variant, and they say he has violated crimes against the sacred timeline. Now, me being me, my thing is, now what gives someone the ability to be able to break the timeline? Because later on in the show, like I said previously, they said that the Avengers time travel was sanctioned. It was all a part of the sacred timeline. So time travel itself isn't the violation. It's literally breaking into a new, complete timeline. So how did Loki be able to do this? How was he able to do it? Why was it him? You feel what I'm saying? How was he able to even do this? So you gotta remember, this is the Loki that's from the first Avengers. So this isn't the Loki that we know right now, from the Loki that has, he went through everything, fought with Thor, sacrificed himself, died with Thanos. It's not the same Loki. None of that has happened. So you just have the Loki who just thinks, I'm supposed to be king and I want to rule Earth, basically. So that's the Loki that's this particular Loki. So of course, he think he gonna be able to do whatever he wants, because that's his glorious purpose, is to rule and to be king. This is the Loki that we're working with right now. So Loki is in his initiation phase now. He's in the something new, in the brand new. He is the zero card in the deck of tarot. He's the fool, because he's embarking on a new journey. He knows nothing about what's ahead of him. And he's a fool because where he's coming from, he's at the highest level. He's a god. He's the god of mischief. But now he's coming into this whole new realm of reality, dealing with an opponent that he knows nothing about. But he's definitely about to find out. So, once they capture him and he gets taken to the TVA, then we find out a little bit about what this place is and what it is that we're dealing with. And he's told that long time ago, there was a multiversal war, battle between timelines, but the all-knowing timekeepers emerged with the sacred timeline. And that Loki himself was a variant, meaning there are someone who steps off of their timeline and creates a nexus event. And if that event is left unchecked, it could lead to another multiversal war. So the sacred timekeepers created the TVA and its workers to maintain the sacred timeline. So this is what we're dealing with, right? And then they flash over and show us Mobius, even though Mobius hasn't met Loki yet. And we see that apparently somebody's killing these TVA agents. There's a little boy who sees something. He asks the little boy who did this. He points to the stained glass window, and it looks like a devil, right? So, of course, they have to point to the devil, to make that connection, because the devil is the adversary that we are familiar with. We live in the Western American society culture. predominantly Christian. So there's the Christian perspective lens. The adversary in Christianity is the devil or Satan, Lucifer. It varies between those or such. So later on, we're going to tie all that in together. But anyway, we go on. Loki goes to his trial. They tell him that he's not supposed to do what he did and all of that type of thing. Not really a coincidence either that there's black women who are the authority, who we keep seeing as the authority over, in this TBA, so to speak. But that's for a whole nother discussion. We won't really get all into that anyway. But so of course he thinks he can use his magic powers. He can't use it there, none of that. But Mobius wants to use him so that he can catch this variant that he's trying to catch, which is a version of Loki. And it really gets interesting. It gets good because, and I keep telling people, psychology is rooted in occultism. Please understand what I tell you. Everything self-help, all that self-improvement, your mind power and all that, that's occultism, okay? It's just watered down to give to you in a way that you can digest. So you do not be scared away by the word occult or anything seen as quote unquote dark or taboo. But it's literally all of the same thing. That's why on the show Lucifer, which I love that show, please watch that show if you're trying to understand this adversarial energy. That's why on the show Lucifer, he has a therapist and he goes to see his therapist. It's a form of shadow work. It's mental alchemy. Alchemy happens on 3 levels: physical, mental, and spiritual. Mental alchemy is nothing but like psychology. It's like therapy. So Mobius has to take him and he has to take him through therapy because he did not live out his timeline. So he did not learn the things that he was supposed to learn and grow along his path because he jumped out. His mom, he missed all the stuff when his mom died, everything. So he didn't experience none of this. So he has to sit him down and kind of give him an awakening so that he can come to terms with himself and be greater than that which he is being at the current moment. Right? So when they're sitting and they're talking, Mobius keeps asking them, why does he want to rule? Why do you want to rule? Because that's what he says. I'm born to rule. I am born to be king. And he's asking them like, so why do you just want to do that? And he says, I would have made it easy for him because freedom is a lie. Choice brings shame and uncertainty. He's talking about duality. He said that even in him saying I would have made it easier for them. See, he's understanding and shedding light to the fact of what the duality and the split does to you and how it can make you feel lesser than when you're brought to between choices that relate between being good or bad. In a sense, it's just duality. So then he begins to show him his life, because of course he's Loki. He thinks that this is still some shit that I can get away from. If it's anything Loki is good at, is getting away, getting out of trouble. That's what he does. So Mobius says to him, for someone who's born to rule, you sure do lose a lot. Might even say it's in your nature to lose. So why would he say nature? What does that mean to say is in someone's nature to be something? And Loki says, the last person to say that to me, it didn't go so well. He said, Phil Coulson. That's Loki killed him in the Avengers movie. But he said, didn't the Avengers come together to literally avenge him by defeating you? So by him doing it, it actually led to the Avengers coming together, becoming solid. Without Loki, there is no Avengers. The Avengers never formed without Loki being mischievous. And that's why later on he goes on to say to him that you are not born to rule. You are born to cause pain and suffering, all to make others better. So all within the court. When Mobius was asking him, like, do you like hurting people? Do you like making people feel afraid or to feel small? And Loki says to him, like, look, I know what I am. I'm a liberator. And in a sense, that's kind of true, because that's what an adversary kind of is. That's what it, because liberation is recognizing and thinking outside your comfort zone to overcome restrictive and damaging beliefs. Liberation is the identification of restricted beliefs or weaknesses and the self-directed dedication to overcome obstacles. At least that's how it's seen in the occultic sense. Or for those who are seen as walking the left-hand path, that's what it means when you're dealing with liberation, when you're looking at the liberator, because the adversary is really the rebellion with a purpose. So Loki hasn't really come to certain things of realization about himself yet, or at least he hasn't accepted those things yet. See, it's one thing to be in the dark, but it's another to be in the dark and recognize that you are the light in the dark. So it's still a process in getting to where it is that he still has to get. So when you look at it, right, and he says, I know what this place is. He said it's an illusion. It's a cruel and elaborate trick conjured by the weak to inspire fear, a desperate attempt at control. So he says, listen to the wording, an illusion. It is a cruel trick. That's what the adversary does. That's what the devil does. Ain't that what they tell you that the devil does? He's a liar, makes you cling on to the illusions of things that's not really there, because ultimately, if you just come to the truth of the matter of what it is, that's how you really truly defeat the devil anyway. So everything he's describing in itself has to do with the adversary. And so he continues to show him everything. So he sees the timeline that he didn't experience. So he has to look at it. And they show him, the scene from Thor 2 when his mom died and the role that he plays and what happens to her. So it's necessary that happens. It's necessary that he gets caught. So he goes back to Asgard. So he does betray his brother. And he does lead the dark elves to his mother, leading to his mother's death, because all this is a part of his evolution. Like, it's dark and it's bad, but it's necessary. Like, it's just like if we take it to the Bible and we look at Jesus, when he spent all those nights in the wilderness being tempted by the devil, because he had to be tempted in order to recognize who and what it was that he is. It's like Judas had to betray him so that he could be crucified, so that he could transition, so that he could die for the sins. It's like understanding that the bad thing has to happen in order for the great thing to occur. That's the order and the chaos. That's understanding the necessity of the adversary. That's getting the point of recognizing that the darkness just brings about the transformation. It's only bringing in the transformation. That's all it's really doing. And so that goes back to what Mobius said to him. He says, you weren't born to be king. You were born to cause pain and suffering and death. That's how it is. That's how it's always going to be, so that others can achieve the best version of themselves. See, Loki started the Avengers. So even though he's the loser of the scenario, he's the cause of it as well. That's the very definition of the adversary. You know what I'm saying? Like, and in understanding who and what you are, that's kind of what you are. Like, you in this whole thing, understand what Loki is, or what the adversary is in reference to you. Okay? Like, you have a soul and you were born trapped in a vessel. So your soul is trapped inside of a vessel. Your soul is suffering inside of that vessel because it doesn't really want to be here. It yearns to go back from whence it came. That's the destruction of the physical. That's why the adversary is bad in reference to the story. Because if we're talking about the physical, and if it's against the physical, then automatically it is bad. If we're going to simplify it in simple terms, just like in the movie Infinite, the black dude wanted to destroy everything because he didn't want to keep coming back. He said, I don't want to keep coming back. My memories come back in the womb. Like, they're different. It's different for me. Why was it different for him? Because we talking about the chaos element. That's what blackness always represents. That's what darkness always represents. That's what black coincides with. So when we say, so a lot of times when people are talking about blackness and black being related to death, is way deeper than the physical. That's why I'm always saying this is a spiritual war, because it's talking about from a spiritual perspective. That darkness is the soul. So if your soul awakens and you leave from here, that is the rapture. That is the end times. That's what every cosmological or cataclysmic event represents in mythology. It represents your soul awakening. So Jesus coming back, or the rapture, is your soul awakening. You know what I'm saying? Ragnarok, that's your soul awakening. Like, all this is just about your soul waking up. And if your soul wakes up, then your soul is going to take back over. And it's no longer your ego in control. Like, you're not going to be a product of the matrix no more. So if you was if we make the whole matrix go and we was waking up, how would the matrix be able to sustain itself? What's the point of the distractions? Maybe it's just to distract you from waking up. Maybe that's the end all be all. It's just waking up. Maybe they just don't want you to wake up. Maybe this just always is what it is. That's why there's always the good and the bad story. So you have to understand that there are other perspectives other than Christian. See, most people are not going to be able to get that until they are able to do that and go beyond it. If you can't go beyond it, then you won't be able to see beyond it. So you got to break the limitations of just what you think that is, because you can only see through that lens. You just filter only to see it one way, when there's so many other ways that you can see it, but you're only seeing it this one way. So you are very limited in what it is that you are able to perceive. So, and then they get interrupted. And of course, Loki think he gonna try and escape. But I think at this point is when he really starts to realize who or what it is. But it takes it overboard once he goes and he realizes that the Infinity Stones are useless and he can't use them. And once he realized that, he ends up going right back into the room and he finishes out seeing his timeline. And he sees everything that happens, even his death. And I think at that point, that's the realization of his true purpose and what he truly is and what he understands. And that's when he was able to face his shadow and do the shadow work and say, I don't enjoy hurting people. I have to, or at least I've had to, because it is part of the illusion. The illusion for control. It's the same trick that he said before. You know, it is just simply an illusion or a cruel or elaborate trick conjured by the weak to inspire fear, a desperate attempt at control. And he says, so you do know yourself? He says, yes, I'm a villain. In that moment, I'm a villain. So he accepting in what he is. Now he's able to transcend and go to another level. And Mobius goes on to tell him, that's not how I see it. And that's not how I see it either. I mean, it's true, but it's not true. You know, it's like it's bad, but it's necessary, man. It's like without you don't get the heights of the story or of the characters without the bad guy, yo. It just doesn't work. That's why your best stories always have a great villain. Like, you can't have a good story without a great villain. Period. You know? And so Loki goes on and says the TVA is formidable. So because he knows, like, I probably can't win this, not this way. You know? So that's when Mobius offers him the opportunity to help him to catch the variant. That is, you know, a version of him or a version of Loki. And then that's how we get on to the next part. So now he's able to understand his purpose. See, Loki kept making emphasis on his choices being his own, him being his own person, him being his own purpose. That's why he is the liberator. That's why he is the adversary. You know what I'm saying? Because that's all of what it is. That's why magic is even practiced for an occultist. You practice magic to liberate yourself from restricted beliefs you were brought up with. That's what you utilize it for. You use magic to examine deep set behaviors which may be causing problems, and then you can modify those behaviors and shape them into productive areas of your life. That is called alchemy. It is a form of magic that is a tool at the disposal of an occultist. You use it to open spiritual communication and experience. You do it to build strength and to refine consciousness, which is all going to build your own confidence and your own charisma. You use magic to define what is possible in your life when your mind is focused. You doing affirmations daily is magic. You practicing the 369 manifestation is magic. You trying to utilize your mind to manifest or positive visualization or whatever it is that you are doing are all forms of magic. You meditating, all of these are things that make you deal with yourself, and so that you hold yourself accountable, and so that you can enact certain changes in your life to get what it is that you are trying to get. Because you are trying to defy the odds, because somebody told you, man, ain't no in the world you're going to be able to make no $1 million. Or you can't be no millionaire. Or that's not the type of job for you. That's not the type of things that you can do. You're trying to defy those odds. You're trying to beat those restrictive and those limiting beliefs. You practicing magic. And that the power and all that and doing that is just coming from your soul, because your soul understands that it has a purpose that goes beyond what this physical may be trying to lead you to do. And that's all that energy represents. It just represents the spark of consciousness that allows you to be able to question something so that you can transform into something more, so that you can become something greater, be the best form of yourself. That's why you do go through the chaos and all of the adversities that you do go through, because it's molding and it is shaping you. It is just necessary part of the journey. And I think I'm going to go back and probably touch on Lucifer. I think I want to do like a whole, I don't know, like a real major breakdown on Lucifer, because Lucifer is 5 seasons in. And it's touched on so many different things, especially this previous season. But this is all teaching the same thing. I talk about this a lot. I talked about this the other day on my Twitter, where I was, the 666, it being the mark of the beast. Because the beast is the soul. It's only talking about the soul because your soul will wake you up out of this matrix. And they don't want you woke up out of this matrix, because then you're no longer in their control. Then you can cause a great awakening. So it's more to it than that, but it's indeed all very necessary. And like I said before, you don't get a good story without a good villain. All the best stories have a great villain. Just look at it and see. But it's what makes the story compelling. It what makes a good story. When you look at a movie about a hero, he has a form. The hero always has an opponent. And a lot of times the opponent seems to be more powerful than that hero, until that hero comes to some realization point and is able to overcome the power of that adversary and become greater. It's pretty much the same thing. So that great power, so it's like understanding that it's just what's in you. So when you're able to face and deal with these things that you think mean something bad about you, really they're a form of power within you, but by you not wanting to deal with it or face it, it becomes something that is used against you, because you don't want to deal with it. So when you don't face and deal with the dark parts of yourself, they just fester and become larger beasts for you to deal with later. And then you don't have the control, and you're out of control because we're taught to not dwell in that, but in reality you can't progress without both your darkness and your lightness. So you need both, and you have to deal with both, period. That's just how it goes. So the adversary is just the one that just makes you deal with that, so that you can be greater, so that you can become what it is that you need to become after dealing with that struggle or that obstacle. So it's only to make you better. It don't mean it's gonna be easy, probably painful, maybe even hurtful. It may even involve death, and death is not always physical. It might mean death to certain parts of yourself, no longer utilizing certain things about yourself, those parts of yourself having to die. But it's that's pretty much what it represents. So we're gonna go ahead and wrap the show up. That's how we're gonna do. So from that little synopsis, maybe you'll check out the rest of the show, and maybe we'll build on it a little later as the show progresses. Maybe we'll come back to it and wrap it up. But today is June 19th, so it is Juneteenth today. If you're celebrating it, then have a good time, enjoy yourself. I know a lot of people are conflicted about it. I'm not gonna speak on it because I just don't want to give my energy to it. But either way it goes, man, y'all be good. Peace.